In this Kotlin on Android development tutorial, we're going to describe how to create and load a fragment with an image view. Welcome to Mobile Application Tutorials. My name's Nigel. Okay, this is the first episode of a new series where we work with fragments. So first thing is, what is a fragment? So just let me jump across to the Google developer website here, Android developer website. Okay, so you can think of a fragment as a mini activity. Fragment can have its own root layouts. It also belongs as part of the activity's lifecycle. So if I go down to here, handling the fragment lifecycle, okay, in this section here you've got the activity state, in this section here you've got the fragment callbacks, and you can basically see when the activity starts what happens to the fragment callback. So it's, as with an activity, you've got on start, on resume, on pause, but it all falls underneath the activity that actually houses that fragment, and we tend to call that as the parent activity. So an activity will always load and unload or replace a fragment. So a fragment does have to belong to an activity. And so why would you want to use fragments? Well, fragments are a lot more efficient way or easier way to switch between fragments than to switch between activities. So if you do have a single application, you might want to consider using fragments instead of activities in your application, and you do get a number of benefits that you will see in this series. Anyway, that's enough talking, so we will make a quick start on this. So what we've got here is, this is my website page. So if you sign up for the free YouTube membership, you do get access to this documentation, and it also includes the details of how to get the source code from GitHub. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we do need to create a new project. Just as a brief overview, we are going to be displaying an image using an image view. That image is going to be downloaded from the internet and displayed. So we do have a previous tutorial series here where we explain how to use the Glide library, installing the Glide library, and how to download an image. So all that activity is going to happen in the fragment code. So the first step will be to do is to create a brand new Android Studio project. So start a new Android Studio project. And I'm just going to make this a very unique name. I'm just going to call it Kotlin Fragments. And of course, please ensure you've got include Kotlin support. You can follow this tutorial on Android. The IDE will convert your code, but recommended to enable this flag here. Select next. I'm just using a lollipop up to the latest. Empty activity. And we'll just keep the name as the main activity and select finish. Wait for that to complete. Okay, the project's now being built. Right, we want to go into our build.gradle file. Okay, and what we need to do here is, because the Glide version 4 library is bleeding edge, we need to change our SDK versions to 27. And update these ones here as well. And then just resync that. Sync is complete. We also need to add another plugin here. And it's Kotlin capped, I believe. I'll just quickly check there. Yep, Kotlin capped. This is required for one of the libraries we're installing. And I'm just going to jump across back to the website here. And we do need to, I'm just going to grab these bottom two here of the documentation for the final libraries just to save a little bit of time. And we'll paste those down below here. And resync it now. Now we need to add another class here to enable access to the Kotlin version 4 libraries here. So what I'm going to do here is click New Kotlin File Class, select class down here, and I'll just call this my app glide module. Make sure I can spell that. Okay, and that's going to extend the app glide module. We'll need a constructor here, and we don't need the curly braces here, but we will need to add an annotation here for glide app module, just glide module. Okay, and it's a good idea at this stage to resync your project files again, just so we can get access to those new lovely Glide 4 version 4 APIs. Okay, of course we're using Glide and we're going to be downloading an image from the internet. We're going to need to set up internet permissions, and we'll add wait clock as well. So if you go into your Android manifest file, and we'll just go down here, call users permission internet, put a closing brace there, and users permission wait clock, again add a closing brace. Okay, that will work for the Glide library for downloading images. Okay, we want to go into the resource folder here, go into layouts, into the activity main, and right here we can just, we don't need the text view, that's just hello world. We're going to replace this with a frame layout, and we want to set both these parameters to match parent. And we'll give the frame layout an ID, and I'll call this Fragment Container. Okay, now I'm going to open up the design tab, and we've just got to set constraints for our Fragment Container. So we'll just use this magic wand button to infer restraints. Go back into text. Okay, so that's our constraint layout. Okay, and I'm also going to create a frame layout for our fragment. So select new, and we'll select layout resource file, and we do need to change this to frame layout, and we will give it the name of fragment first image. And I'm just going to select the text tab down here. I do like to tidy these up, align these up, just so I can see the elements inside my frame layout. Okay, I'm going to add a couple of items inside here. One will be the image view. And the image view, we're going to match the parent with both of those. We're going to fill the entire screen with that. I'll give that image view an ID, and we'll call that the first fragment image view. And finally, I just want to scale that to center crop. This will just maintain the aspect ratio of the image itself. And underneath this, we're going to add a progress bar as well, because we're downloading images from the internet. We'll just let the user know that something's happening. Okay, so this will be wrap content, and wrap content for the layout width and height We will give this an ID. Something nice and simple, we'll just call it progress bar. And we'll set the visibility for that as invisible. And finally, we will align that as well. So we'll set a layout gravity and make that center. So we've got this layout that we want to use for our fragment. So we will create the fragment now. So select new Kotlin file class. Under here, select class, and I'll call this first image fragment. Select OK. Okay, so here we've got the first image fragment here. We are going to extend the fragment, and make sure you select the Android support version 4 for that. And we will need to call the constructor for that fragment. Okay, so the first step I think I'll do in this fragment is to create the fragment. We're going to set up a new instance for where it will be called from the activity. And what I'm going to do here is use a companion object. So this is equivalent in Android Java of a static class. So this is a way for calling functions here through the class name, basically. So in here, we're going to create a function, and I'll call this new instance. And basically, it's just going to return the first image fragment there. So basically, it calls the constructor of the first image fragment and returns that first image fragment object back to us. Okay, now we need to inflate. We need to attach this fragment to the layout we created before and inflate it. So I'm going to do this in the onCreate view. And just let me close the side window so you can see the full screen. Okay, and to do that, we can just inflate it from here. So just change this line to what I've got here. Call the inflator. And we'll call the inflate. And it's the layout that we created for that. So that's the fragment first image. We need to pass in the container, and we can set the final parameter to false. Okay, so that's the actual class part of this implemented. Now we can set up the glide implementation where we download and display the image inside this fragment. So first thing I want to do is to get the URL address. So if we go into the documentation on the website here, we've got this URL. Just for time and simplicity, I'm just going to copy this and paste it into our fragment here. Right now I'm going to create a new function, and this is where we do the actual load using glide. So load image using glide. Okay, so we can just call the glide app itself. Provide it with the context here, and it's going to be the calling activity, and to get that in Kotlin we can just call activity. We want the output as bitmap. We want to load, and in here I'm going to call URI pass so we get the correct formatting, and call our image URL. And now into the image view we want to put it into, in this case I want to set up a callback to turn off our progress bar. So while we're there, let's go back to our image view itself. which is in the first app fragment here. I just want to rename this progress bar. It's too generic because we're going to have two progress bars. We're going to create two fragments just to switch between them in the following tutorials. So this is too generic, so I'm just going to call this first fragment progress bar. Right, so into is where we actually turn off the progress bar, but we need to turn on the progress bar as we start the download, basically as we start this fragment. So what I'll do here is call our first argument progress bar, set the visibility to visibility is visible, make it visible. So if we go into this progress bar, as you can see here, by default it's invisible, so we're now making it invisible because we're starting a download. And right, so if we go into, which is where we specify the image view to put the bitmap into, I'm going to use an object expression here because we're going to set up a callback. And this is going to be the bitmap image view target. It gives us a callback. We will have to put it in, specify our image view there, which is the first fragment image view. And set up some curly braces. And it's just a matter of calling on resource ready. And then down here we can actually, so once on resource is ready, this is indicating to us that the bitmap's now been downloaded and it's been put into that image view. So we can now close our progress bar. Set the visibility, view.invisible. Okay, that's the only reason we're using the callback there. Okay, so that's the glide function now implemented. We do want to call this function, so just let me add another place. So I'm going to create, overload, implement another fragment method here, and it's going to be the on activity created. And so basically what this means is once your parent activity is fully completed, all its views have been inflated, it will notify the fragment, right, activity is now completed, just to let you know. And we went, oh, thanks. So we can now do our load image views in Glide. That's probably a good place to put that. And now our fragment's completed, we can now call it from the parent activity. So go into main activity, and I'm going to add a new function here. I'll call this replace fragment. It's going to take just a single parameter of the type fragment. Make sure you select the support.version4. Okay, the first thing you want to do when you replace or load a fragment is to get a fragment transaction. So I'll set up a value for that. And I'll call this fragment transaction equals. And to get that, I can call the support fragment manager in Kotlin and then begin transaction. So we're starting a fragment transactions. That's how they tend to work. Adding, replacing, deleting fragments takes the form of a transaction. Okay, so now we can actually call our fragment transaction. And this one I'm going to actually call replace. It will do the same work as adding, but we're going to be adding a number of fragments in the following tutorials, so we might as well just put the replace in here now. Okay, and the first parameter here is if we go back to our main activity, we've got the frame layout here. This is a container that we're going to use to load our fragments into, and a frame layout, that's one of the jobs that it can do, is support displaying fragments. So that's why we specifically set it up and called it Fragment Container. So we're going to load it into that, so we can call it r.id.fragment container. And the next one is just going to be with the fragment, and that's the parameter. Finally, we need to call our fragment transaction again. and commit that transaction. Nothing will happen unless you commit that. Okay, that's the replacement function finished. We do need to provide it with a fragment, so we'll do that from inside the onCreate. So I'm just going to create a fragment first. I'll just call it fragment. Equals, and it's the name of our fragment, which is the first image fragment. And then we can just call new instance to create that fragment object for us. And then it's just a matter of calling replace fragment and then passing in the fragment. Okay, so when we start this application, it should just run through the code in the onCreate and call the replace fragment, which should start a fragment transaction where it'll be replacing, which is similar to an add, basically putting in our fragment into the fragment container. Okay, so let's run this and see if it works. Okay, you could see the progress bar starting up for a little while the image downloaded. Glide library is pretty good. It will cache that, so if you run the application again, it will start up a lot quicker. That's one of the benefits of using a library like Glide. But we can successfully see that we are loading that fragment with the image view into our main activity, and it's being displayed fine there. And that completes this episode on how to create a fragment using Kotlin. So we learned how to create a fragment, and that fragment downloaded and displayed an image using the Glide version 4 API. And we also introduced fragment transactions, which you can use to add or replace a fragment in a frame layout, which we called the frame container. Okay, so all these episodes are currently available for members on the professional plan, or you can buy them for a one-off fee of $10. The details of that are in the description. Each episode will be released on a weekly basis, first to this channel, then a few days later, normally the end of the week, made public on YouTube. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to me. You should get notified of the new episodes that I do publish to YouTube. And also it's helpful if you do follow me on Twitter and Facebook, because I do all my announcements, including tutorials being published on those platforms as well. And thank you for taking the time for watching this one. Bye for now.